right, this week, our guest, Mike, probably one of the most solid and consistent players we had at UCF. This guy who's always had a knack for making big plays, was a part of some really fun, exciting teams as UCF kind of rose up the ranks at an interesting time. Mike, and he is involved in perhaps the most famous play in UCF history. We'll get to that later on. He is the answer to the trivia question, as Mark Daniels often says. But let's bring in our guest. Played from 1999, 2002. His name is Jimmy Fryzel. He was a former wide receiver at UCF. Jimmy, first off, thanks for taking the time to join us. Hope all is well.
All's going well. Appreciate you inviting me and being on tonight.
Well, let's start at the beginning. I always like to do this, Jimmy. How do you end up at UCF? I know you were a Florida kid, so you played high school ball in Florida, but how did your journey at UCF start? How did you end up deciding that's where you wanted to go to college and go play football?
Ultimately, I grew up in Lakeland. I was fortunate enough to play for the Dreadnoughts there in Lakeland. Had a great high school program. I actually got recruited pretty early, early in those days, by UCF. Went to a camp over the summer before my senior year, was offered a scholarship at the end of camp, followed up the next week going to a Florida camp, and ended up, honestly, it was just all throughout the year. They stayed on me, nothing from official visits was until the end of the season. So it wasn't until the following January, but I just felt like a comfortable rapport with. He was just a huge influence on me. I didn't know that at the time, but felt comfortable as a receiver coach. Coach Cruz was our head coach at the time. I knew he liked to throw the ball. Being a receiver where we ran the triple option a lot, as a wide blocker. So it was exciting to say, hey, I'm not going to get 15 catches for a season, be able to kind of maybe match that in a game. But it was exciting. It was close. Some of the MAC schools, a couple of the smaller Big Ten schools had offers, but, I am a Florida guy, and the weather you're just kind of used to, the environment I was comfortable with, and, hindsight, I'm very glad with the decision I made.
Take us back in those times, though, Jimmy. So late 90s. What was the sort of the reputation of UCF football? Obviously, it hadn't had a ton of success at this point, hadn't really broken through a lot. What was the reputation as a high school kid about going to UCF? Were you kind of like looked at like you're going there? Was it an up-and-coming program? What was kind of the chatter back in those days about UCF?
Well, we were fortunate enough that we were post-Culpepper. So his senior year in college was my senior year in high school. So, great job recruiting, but, our first 4 games, I want to say, were Purdue, Florida, Georgia Tech, and Georgia. We had Auburn that year. So, and I think those first 4 teams all had a Heisman candidate at quarterback. The momentum of a 9-2 season, what you got publicity-wise with Culpepper, going in the first round. There was some serious momentum behind the program. And like I said, just kind of watching the way they played when we came to some of those games, unofficial visits and enjoying the environment. The Citrus Bowl at the time, it's a huge stadium. So that was a draw as well. You're playing on a top tier, where the Citrus Bowl was held. And it had that feel of, you can kind of continue your football career and, we're going in the right direction.
You joined the wide receiver room that had guys like Kenny Clark, Charles Lee, Tyson Hinshaw. You're coming in as a freshman. What did these older guys teach you that first year?
The biggest thing I think would have been kind of, organizational, like time management from studying and knowing every position. Because, again, in high school, we only played with 2 wide at the time. So we didn't have a lot of slot guys. Everybody was kind of outside. You had 2 backs for running backs. Every now and then you'd flex a tight end. So really you kind of knew the X and the Z position. And coming into a spread offense where you have 3, 4, maybe even sometimes 5 wideouts, it was really important those guys telling me to understand every position for every play. And so when you understood what someone else was doing, either how to take a release, where to take a release, what routes you could spend time on, where some routes you were clearing out. And it was really understanding the entire offense throughout all receivers rather than, hey, this is what I have on that play. Why behind it.
What about just like in the locker room? Those guys give you a hard time being the young guy? Was there hazing going on to make you carry their helmets and anything like that?
I mean, there's some little rookie hazing, but again, you're everybody at a D1 program is an all-star in high school. And then you come there and then you just restart again. You got in trouble if you try to stand up for yourself or, start kind of flapping your, I mean, it's a different level every time you go. And it did help me. I came in the summer before just to kind of get some reps, some of the 7-on-7 stuff, the weight room, to kind of get into that flow before it was full go, having school, balancing kind of school and athletics together. But I mean, ultimately, yes, sir, no, sir, even to some of the players now that I could talk differently now, but being a freshman, I mean, you didn't want to come in and claim you're great and then you get blindsided one of those plays.
Did you have a welcome to college moment at practice or anything like that?
I mean, not early on. The speed, because again, we weren't in pads or anything through that summer part, but the speed was a big thing. I mean, coming from high school and going to college and everybody can run in college, that was an adjustment you had to make with speed just throughout the entire play. Like as soon as the ball was snapped, you got to be 100% versus sometimes you could kind of lull through some routes or, take your first three. You just don't have that amount of time. From a contact, well, I'm sure first day in pads, there wasn't anything like across the middle. I mean, we weren't trying to injure anybody, but sure, just even the stock blocking where DBs, linebackers are trying to bull rush you outside. I mean, I was always kind of heavy into the weight room so I could hold my own on that, but there were some strong impacts.
Yeah, Jimmy, what was the plan for you freshman year? How much did you expect to play in that first season versus how much did you actually get to play?
So, I mean, first year, honestly, after going into our first week, we had decided to redshirt. And I think at the time it was 2 games and a half, like 2.5 games. If you didn't play the first 2.5 games, then you could still redshirt. So it was like, okay, we'll travel you. And, didn't see it down in first game, second game, nothing the first half of the third game. So I go in a halftime. I'm like, okay, well, I'm redshirting this year. Kickoff return, first one, second half, I'm out there. I was like, oh, there goes my redshirt year. And I ended up having 3 catches that game in the second half, just kind of cleanup duty. We got kind of stomped by Georgia Tech. And then it was, hey, you're not a redshirt, but, I mean, at the end of the year, I only had 4 catches, probably saw maybe some action in 7 games. I mean, good learning experience, but, I kind of look back, maybe I should have redshirted, had an extra year, but who knows what would have happened then. So timing-wise, they asked me to continue playing. I did. And then, it only set me up for my sophomore year.
Well, we've had a chance to ask a lot of people about this game, Jimmy. And you mentioned that you were there, obviously, at number 11, Georgia, driving late, now known as the burglary between the hedges. We've talked to Vic Penn. We've talked to Javier Borlegi. We had Coach Lounsbury on a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, for those who don't remember, phantom PI calling Kenny Clark, which turns the game around. Obviously, UCF could have potentially won that football game. Jimmy, you were on the field that day. I assume you saw that play. What was your reaction when you saw there was a yellow flag on the ground? And initially, a lot of people thought that was on Georgia. Turns out it was on Kenny Clark. What was your view of that play? What did you see in that play, and what was your reaction?
Well, we were already in, I want to say, it would have been a further field goal, but we were in field goal range. So when you see the flag out, especially as an offensive guy in the end, I mean, it's defensive PI. So, great, now we got another shot to score, or it's an easier field goal. You got to kind of think there was a homer call on that. You don't call offensive PI. It's just it's one of those unfortunate things. Even going back watching the tape, we're biased, but we still didn't see it. If anything, it's a no call. Like I said, we were in field goal range, and that kind of backed us out. But yeah, again, we kind of always had that little bit our freshman year of being close. Even though UCF before they had a couple of those top contenders, like they were close, we just needed to get that ideal win, and it's another opportunity we had, and we just couldn't make it work.
You were a guy, I loved watching your style of play because you were never afraid of contact. I think the team awarded you the Big Stick Award one year because you're just a guy that goes out there and lays the hit on the defense. Do you have a favorite hit of yours that you remember as a guy during a game?
I mean, I do, but it's one I didn't win for. It was actually Arkansas. So, a Big Stick Award is not supposed to go to an offensive player. We had a screen play that just gave me a clear blindside block on the outside backer every time. So that's usually how I got my Big Stick Award. It was just a kill shot. Now it would be ejected for every one of those hits because they were definitely in the ear hole. But it was actually against Arkansas where I lined him up, came in, he didn't even see me, and I threw everything I had, and he just bent over and stood back up and tapped me on the butt. He was like, "Nice try." I was like, man. And the entire, for 2.5 years, I had been laying people out on that. And he just took it. And I gave him everything I had.
What about playing in the Kruczek offense? How fun was that as a wide receiver? I mean, there were a lot of bubble screens, but it was fast-paced like you were saying earlier. How much did you enjoy playing in that style?
I mean, I loved it coming from high school where, like I said, I was kind of a wide blocker, and even Cruz gave me some of that on some of the other schools that were recruiting me at the time. It's like, oh, you want to continue being a wide blocker, or do you want to catch some passes? I loved it. I mean, it was awesome as a receiver, but again, it wasn't complex. They made sense. A lot of, both sides were mirrored, and then you're basing it off the middle backer, which direction he goes. I will say, the bubble screens you bring up, a lot of that is very dependent on the outside guys blocking, which usually, for the bubble screens, I had either Tyson inside or even Capers later on, and where I was the blocker. So I did take some pride in that, had definitely a lot of practice in high school. So to be able to stock block, I mean, that was big. Now it hurts the average, but, those guys getting 3-yard catches and 80-something catches a year. I don't know. Got to wait out.
Jimmy, start that 2000 season. After 4 games, Vic Penn gets injured. He goes out, and Ryan Schneider comes in to take over as quarterback. As a receiver, what's the adjustment like when you got to go from one guy to the next? And what was the difference between Vic Penn and Ryan Schneider from a receiver's perspective?
I mean, we still are practicing with Schneider the whole time. So I know, he redshirted his freshman year. And then kind of that spring of his freshman year, I mean, he really stood out, and it was just a, gamer concept. He knew where to throw it. And I still say this, he had one of the most catchable balls as a quarterback. And it wasn't like flaming RPM or, RPMs. It was in the right place, and it was a catchable ball. And the guy would take hits. He wasn't trying to scramble around. He'd step up in the pocket. He'd wait till last minute if he needed to. But, I mean, he would put it on there, and majority of the time he was making the right reads. And, nothing against Vic, and I didn't play as much my freshman year with Vic. But, Schneider got an opportunity his redshirt freshman, our sophomore year, and, I mean, never looked back.
Well, that year in 2000 obviously is going to be known for one game, and probably one game only, Jimmy, is that's the game at Alabama. Obviously, UCF comes out with the victory. I know you play a role later on in the game, but let's start from the beginning. Obviously, UCF was down a little bit. A lot of big plays in that game. Forget about the game winner for a second. Is there another play in that game that you look back on and say, hey, that was the most important play of that game, or that's the one play that you point to that says, hey, this was a big reason why we won that game that day?
I mean, the tide turner, I think, was probably Bush's interception.
Yeah.
Because I am trying to think. It was did we get up a field goal and then there was kind of a monsoon and it's, oh my gosh, here we go again. Then all of a sudden we get that pick six and you kind of bring it back. And, as the game continued to go, I mean, we weren't favored obviously in that game. You have that belief. And as we're moving the ball and, you bring up about Schneider, but something even from that 2-minute drill, I mean, we all felt so comfortable with him in it. Like, hey, let's go down and win this. Now, again, you brought up the Georgia game. I'm hoping nobody had that doubt in their mind. Here we go again. We got another big name school. We have a chance to win. What's going to happen? But, I mean, we pulled it off. And I'd say I feel Bush's pick was probably that's a 2-possession change right there.
Yeah, Mike just posted that the other day. That's one of like the most criminally underrated plays in UCF history. People forget about how important that play was, or to your point, that the momentum. But you had a couple of big catches down the stretch of that game too, Jimmy. What was it about your connection with Ryan, particularly late in the game, where he knew he could trust you, and you just seemed to be, it was like a 3rd and 10, you got 11, right? It was a 3rd and 7, you got 7. You seemed like you were the guy he was looking for on some of those really tight throws, especially down the stretch.
I mean, it's just we ran that every Wednesday and Thursday. And again, that was kind of our no huddle, if you will, our signals. We all understood the offenses. Everybody ran the routes and the spacing that we were supposed to. So it was just a trust factor, I think, of, hey, is it Tyson? Is it me? Is it Kenny? Who's the guy that's going to be open because of what the defense is running? And it ended up just being me on, I know that last drive was a couple, and I know there was one before. I did kind of get laid out in that one.
How cool is it now that Mark Daniels, he made the call, Mike Hedge snapped it, Jimmy Fryzel held it, Javier Borlegui kicked it. One of the coolest, biggest plays in UCF history. You're right there in the middle of it. And how nervous were you going into that play?
So nervous, no, but looking back now, why anyone would want to be a holder. And this was actually Jay Gruden had brought this up to me later on in my career. He said, all you can do with holding is mess up. I mean, that's you're expected to catch it. You're supposed to put it down. All you can do is mess up. That's the only way they'll remember. So it is nice to have kind of my name in with Hedge and Borlegui through that infamous kick. From a nerve wise, again, I think it was just one of those, we practiced it so many times. Again, that 2-minute drill, we'll end it with the touchdown. We'll end it with time. We'll end it with field goal units running out. It was just something we practiced week in, week out. And this was an opportunity to actually execute it.
One of the big things about that play was the guy in Alabama jumps off sides. Nobody on our line moves. And if we do, maybe it changes things a little bit. You have to redo it. So did you see that guy jump off sides from your point of view, or were you just focused in on the snap?
Just focusing on the ball. I had no idea until, that was the thing. When you go back and watch tape afterward, reaction-wise, even from our tackles, usually you do. You see somebody come across, you make a move. I think at that time, you still could come across and go back as a defensive player. And then if the offense moved, they probably would have called the penalty on us. So again, it's, repetition, it's practicing, guys holding their water is what we call it, and just staying in until the ball was actually snapped on our end.
And then were you on the field for the kickoff after that went on for about 2.5 minutes?
I was not, but I did not have a good feeling. Feel great, come off, you look at the clock, how much time left, and then it just goes through your mind. I'm not on kickoff coverage, and I'm sitting there like, can we just get this tackle? Then you see that ball start squirting around. And, when you see the first flag come out, then you're like, all right, that's fine.
Jimmy, how did you become the holder? Obviously, sometimes that's reserved for the punter, for backup quarterbacks. How did you become the holder?
So, I held in high school, and then I think I was kind of a backup holder that freshman year. And I remember it was when Vic got hurt, because Vic was our holder. And then when Vic got hurt earlier in the year, Jimmy hold, and I know Borlegui, liked the way I held the ball and went and kind of told him, look, Jimmy's my holder. And I just continued from there on out.
Like, I know it's not impossible, right? But how hard is it? Like, you're on the field, right? You're running offense. All of a sudden they run the special teams on. Now you got to get, to the holder spot. Was it difficult back then to be a full-time player, a full-time starter, and then never come off the field in special teams and still stay locked in for that one play when the play before maybe you were on offense or you ran a long route or you're a little winded? Was that hard to do back then?
No, I mean, my big thing is I couldn't hold my gloves. So I always had to take my gloves off. For some reason, it was just spinning the ball. I always had to be barehanded. So I just take off the gloves, throw them down. But you bring up something like Bama, and, I mean, you don't have time to think. So maybe that helps. You just run your spot, get it down. All right, you ready, Berlegi? And then make our cadence and snap it.
Did you have any fake plays? Like, did you have any plays for where you could throw the ball out of that?
Oh, I cannot throw. Never could. So, it was a fire call, but nothing planned. It was a bad snap or something like that. Hey, it's scramble, and then I'm throwing up a grenade and hoping someone catches it.
All right, Jimmy, just us talking here really quickly. We had Javi on the show, super nice guy, really, really, really good player, obviously a big part of UCF history. You had some struggles here and there with field goal kicks. How confident were you on that kick when Javi lined up? Just you, me, and Mike talking here. How confident were you when we lined up for that one?
The doubt would have been, are we going to do it again? And not really against Javi, but from our team. We had the lead, then you come back, lose it. You got an opportunity. Can you make it? I will say, not toot my own horn, but he did kick a lot better once I started holding. And again, we have such a mental game. Like, maybe it was something as simple as that. I mean, I've never looked at it, but I'd love to see like his percentages, his sophomore year compared to his junior year. Just what his percent of made field goals were. Even even in practices, when we would do the 2-minute drills, we put him and try to put pressure and say, if he misses the kick, we all have to do sprints. So then you're getting the whole team to hate you. So, and it just, again, I hate to say it, it's that repetition. It's putting him in and just saying, hey, we're going to put you in this spot. Okay, now it is, we've done it 100 times. Every week we're doing this. Make it count. My big thing is I better get the hold down. I don't want the blame on, he dropped the snap.
What was the celebration like in the locker room, the plane ride, and then the party back in Orlando?
Well, it was an earlier game, I think. So we definitely had a later evening party continue to go on. I think it was a little bit of relief. It was a little bit of that monkey off our back because we never had been able to pull through at the end, and to kind of do it. And, like you said, maybe people are going, okay, we're going to do it again. We're going to drive down and then we're going to miss a kick, or somehow we'll find a way to lose. The kickoff return, somehow they're going to and do some miracle laterals. It was a little disbelief. Initially guys are yelling, some guys are just kind of taking a deep breath, and then I think it sunk in for everybody. And then, it was exciting. It was exciting, and it's something that, as a college career, you remember.
Looking at those rosters, 2001, 2002, you guys had a lot of NFL talent on those teams. Talking Doug Gabriel, Brandon Marshall, Darcy Johnson, Michael Gaines. Even on defense, too, you had Rashad Jeanty, Atari Bigby, Asante Samuel, the specialists, Matt Prater, Ryan Flynn, all guys that had NFL careers. How good were those teams? Could those teams beat the recent UCF teams of the last couple of years?
So where we had really good athletes, we weren't as deep. I think, I went out to one of the spring practices, just the size and the depth, I think, is where we've grown as UCF. We had great individuals. The state of Florida has some, great talent here. We were able to pull them. But if you looked across kind of a team and, not pulling out offensive line or defensive line, but did you have, all 5 of your offensive linemen possibly going into camps? or it was just there were some fall offs when you had substitutions or you had injuries. We just didn't have the depth all the way through. Competitively, I think we could have beaten any of them. It's a different game now. I will have to say that. I mean, hell, they can't even touch you as a receiver now. It's awesome.
Yeah, you'd have 2,000 yards a season, right?
I know. And 3 less concussions.
Jimmy, that 2001 season, obviously you're back, Schneider's back, a lot of guys on offense are back. Team finished at 6-5 though. When you look back on that season, did you expect that there maybe would be a jump after what you all went through in 2000 and sort of growing in together and Schneider not getting experience, obviously you still being there? Did you think that maybe the team would take a bit of a jump in 2001?
Yeah, because I think we only had maybe 3, might have been only 3 of kind of the bigger name teams. I mean, we lost some games we definitely shouldn't have. I will say, that was a letdown year. I will say out of probably my entire 4 years, I thought my junior year's defense was the best defense I played with. They were talented. They had a lot of guys that could fly around the ball. I think offensively, we struggled a lot worse than what we thought we would.
Yeah, you started that year at Clemson, a 21-13 loss with a late INT by Schneider, a mixed extra point. Then you go to Syracuse, lost 21-10. That's kind of back to that, that earlier UCF phase where it's like, hey, we're going to pull this out. We have opportunities, and at the last second, something comes up, and the season starts 0-2 after those 2 wins, and then you go to Virginia Tech a couple weeks later, and obviously they were a really good team back then, and they went pretty handily. So you start off kind of 1-3. Did you kind of feel at that point like the season? Guys kind of got down a little bit. Guys got a little bit frustrated with sort of the start of the season at that point?
No, because at that time, we were still independent. So for us to be able to schedule those bigger name teams, we had to do it at the beginning of the year. It stinks in case you have any, fumbled snaps or offsides. Just those first game, second game jitters to kind of get in routine. Plus you could start swapping guys in positions. Seeing who actually can play on Saturdays versus, okay, you're doing well at practice, but once the lights come on, are you putting in the same effort? Are you getting the same results? So there's always change throughout the year. Again, that year before, we had, like I said, the first 4 or something were legit guys. That's what we wanted to come to UCF, was to be able to play some of those bigger teams. So I don't think it's necessarily that you didn't quit or anything. I don't think we were that good of a team that year.
After losing that second game to Clemson, 2001, 3 days later, September 11th, and that is just something that changes. The whole world changed that day. Yet you guys got to go out and play a football game like 11 days later. How weird was that? Preparing for football, just going back into the clubhouse after something like that happened in New York. Was it weird for you guys?
Well, yeah, because, we kind of all found out via TV. Our practices were in the afternoon. So if you weren't at class, then you're kind of waking up and seeing all this stuff on the news. And it's questions of what is going on. I want to say they, canceled school the rest of that week. So then all of a sudden your campus ends up empty, and you have to find the motivation of, well, we still have to kind of wait. And I don't think we understood what we do now at the time, of what 9/11 entailed going through that week. From a terrorism part, I think it still was kind of being discovered, say, that week. So, hey, this is, it's almost, and I'm not comparing the two to the same, but sometimes we'd have hurricanes coming through to where school was out, but hey, you're still practicing. You're practicing the worst rain part. Like, you just kind of stay on schedule and keep going. And, your focus was supposed to be on football. Now looking back at it, it's kind of crazy to think that was in the middle of the season, waking up on, I want to say it was a Tuesday morning, I think. And kind of seeing that stuff on the news and just saying, well, what are we doing? Like, what's going on right now? And, again, there's some diverted attention. I'm sure that, from a coaching, from players, how do you get mentally back into, hey, this is what we got to do. We got to fly up. We got to play. There's some distraction there. But it was odd. I mean, it was odd. And I think it was really odd because nobody really knew the magnitude of what was going on.
Right. And then going into your senior year, we're joining the MAC, which as a Florida team in itself is a little weird. We have a little history with some of these teams, like Akron, right? That was a kind of little bit of a rivalry. They beat us, I think, in 2000. In 2001, was that the best game we ever played, even before we joined the MAC? We beat them, 57-17?
We spanked them. I do remember that. They did have some talented guys that my sophomore year when we played up there. But man, facility wise, it was like a little trailer locker room. Their turf might have been the oldest turf at the Rubber Bowl. That's one of the, there's no excuses, but you need to get up for that game. We came out flat. I think we had a little bit of remorse from how we played, but a little excitement to kind of dominate and make up. And we were playing at home. We just always seemed to play a lot better at home than we did some of those road games, especially up when it was, Mid-American Conference on the road, gloomy weather, a little cold.
Did you enjoy those games going up against Marshall and Akron and those northern teams, or you didn't like the cold?
You never like it if you can't feel your hands completely, especially being a receiver, or you're worried about pulling a muscle because everything feels cold. It's funny looking back now on at least my senior year. In the MAC, you had Leftwich, Charlie Fry, Josh Cribbs, Roethlisberger, Josh Harris. I think there was you had a stack of NFL guys that were quarterbacks on all these other teams. Gradkowski was the other one. And, you kind of sit there and say, oh, it's the MAC conference. It's the MAC conference. That was a really good conference that year with a lot of, great quarterbacks, leaders that all played in the NFL. But, yeah, from the weather part, I always liked playing at Florida better. You're just more comfortable at home. But I didn't mind it going up there. I was born up in Ohio, lived up in kind of those Midwest states till I moved down to Florida. So nice little change of weather, but I'd much prefer down here.
Jimmy, going to that 2002 season, your senior year, what were your goals? Obviously you knew this was your last year playing at UCF. As you kind of went at that offseason, approaching that last year, what were your goals? What did you want to accomplish both as a team and as a player in your last year as a UCF Knight?
Definitely as a team, we wanted to go to a bowl game. And that was the thing, we had finally gotten affiliated with the conference. So you didn't have to have some astonishing, 10-1 or 10-2 record and beat some big name teams in order to even get a grasp of the bowl. And I think there might have been 22 bowl games. There weren't as many as there are now. So that was our number one thing because no team in UCF's history had gone to a bowl game. Second would have been, going into the MAC and us being from Florida, being confident and having speed, we expected to win the conference. So that would have been second. And then, obviously we want to get one of those big marquee wins if we could. I know opening up at Penn State. But really, it was a conference championship and a bowl game. Were our top two from a team perspective. And then me personally, on 1,000-yard was kind of a thought. Can I get 1,000 yards this year? If not, I'd much rather take the team stuff if my number's not called as many times or, but I know 1,000 yards is kind of my goal personally as a receiver.
Well, kind of that theme early on in that season was falling behind late and then making a comeback and pulling games out almost, right? Penn State, obviously, we're down 20-9, make a comeback, and end up losing by 3. But then we go to Marshall, which, to your point, at that point, conference game, they had Byron Leftwich, who was a big-name quarterback in college football at that point in time. And you talked about the defense earlier. He didn't play great that game. I think, the defense pretty much held him in check, and we pick him off late. We're down 26-21. We have a chance to drive. And it ended in an interception. What do you remember kind of about that final drive and that opportunity to really put our first ever conference win at Marshall, a team that people really loved, that Leftwich, a quarterback everyone really talked about? What do you remember about that final drive heading down there when Schneider threw the interception to sort of really end the game for us that game?
I mean, the expectations were we were going to win. I remember telling Sante and those guys, we need one more possession. You guys can get us one more possession, we're going to go win. I mean, that was the strength of that year that we all believed as a team, because we had a team meeting. It was either after Arizona State or it was after Marshall. I mean, we expected the offense to carry us that year. We had enough seniors on the team, enough juniors with playing time. We felt explosive. We had really good camps, really good off seasons. So we expected the offense to carry us. And I mean, we weren't putting up the points that we were supposed to. And I really felt, I remember, when they got that last stop and we had the ball, I felt really comfortable we were going to go down and win.
Which one of those losses hurts the most? We had a lot of close ones we talked about, the Georgia 199, the Penn State 02, Georgia Tech. People forget about that one in 2000 was a close game. Even the Clemson game, when they beat us with a fake field goal that turns into a touchdown. Any of those still give you nightmares?
The Marshall one still does, just because as the season played out and, Leftwich had that injury, we win that game. We end up winning. I can't remember if it was North or South or East or West, but we won our side of the conference. Then you go and probably rematch against Toledo in the MAC championship game, which that was another one we felt we gave up, being up and then losing at the end. And then, like I said, getting that ultimate goal of winning a conference championship and going to a bowl game. So the Marshall one's the one that, as they didn't run the table and they end up losing, I think it was to Akron, it was Akron. And we just need that win. And it's something, you want to go back and say, God, can we just play it again? Or could we play it at the end of the season? That back half of the year, like, our offense was connecting so much better than we did at the beginning of the season. And that's where you bring up, hey, would you like, playing some of these bigger teams later in the year? That's why. I mean, we just got chemistry going offensively, and, I wish we could have played them later in the season.
Well, you met your personal goal, over 1,000 yards that year, and so did Doug Gabriel, one of the best duo for a wide receiver in one season ever at UCF. How special was that combination you guys had? Are you guys the best wide receiver duo ever? We've had some great ones. Where do you put yourself?
I got to say we're the best from a duo part, just because I think we brought so much, Doug could take one, catch a 3-yard route, and he's gone 80. My whole concept really was, hey, keep the sticks moving. And it was just kind of a hit and miss. And, we did some of our plays where it's weird looking back now, but when we put the two of us on the same side, everything worked out. I wish we would have run more of that in those formations of having us both on the same half. Whether or not people would start kind of doubling or tilting over, maybe. But I think it was two of us, two seniors. We had some young guys. Really kind of pushing each other each day as well. Obviously, I want to say I was better than Doug, and Doug wants to say he's better than me. So we kind of always had that competitiveness, even though we got along, great together. Still talk with Doug to this day. I would say we were, we got some guys who do some incredible things in the NFL, but from a collegiate part, like at the time at UCF, I feel we're at least top 3.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple other ones you can compare yourself to. Sean Beckton and Sean Jefferson. It was a dynamic duo. You got Brandon Marshall and Mike Sims Walker in 2005, had a crazy year. More recently, you got Traquan Smith and Gabe Davis together. Gabe was a little bit younger. But single season, I think you guys are right there at the top.
Actually, so I have the 2021 UCF Media Guide here, Jimmy. You and Doug are still listed number 1 for receiving tandem yardage, 2,363 in 2002. Number 2 is Gabe Davis, Trey Nixon. So you're still listed number 1. So there's data to back up your number 1 spot.
There you go. Go to the numbers.
Well, obviously that season ends, and again, you don't get your goal of going to a bowl game. 7-5 overall. Obviously, UCF gets shut out. Seemed to be a theme back in those days of us getting right there on the cusp and not getting a bowl game. But that last game, obviously, we play Ohio, a nice victory. You head to the locker room, you take the pads off for the last time, you take off that UCF jersey and that UCF helmet. What emotions were you feeling at that point when you sort of recognized that your UCF career was over?
I think there still might have been the smallest of hope. Like, do we get an outside bid? When it comes to bowl games, we kind of felt probably not. It was really kind of looking at the younger guys. I'd say more of them came up to us, just said, thank you. We appreciate it. Felt like at least Doug and I set examples. Whether or not there was anything after college football was to be determined. So I thought there was a Miami, Ohio, maybe not. I thought it was Miami, Ohio, and Marshall still had to play. And there was still like an outside chance whether or not if Miami, Ohio beat them, then it would be a 3-way tie. Would we somehow get a nod? I think there was still hope I was holding on to.
Was that the game when they carried Leftwich around on the drive? I remember that game impacted.
I thought that was Akron when he broke his leg. And that was the thing he had missed. I can't remember if he had missed a game and they lost another one, or somehow we kind of got back into it. But I thought it was a Miami, Ohio Marshall game that if Miami, Ohio had beaten them, we still had a shot. Or does it come to a 3-way tie? How do you do East versus West, wins and losses? Will we get the nod? We still had some belief there could be an opportunity.
Well, you mentioned post playing. You obviously spent a number of years in the Arena Football League, and there in Orlando as well with the Predators. How cool was that for you to get a chance to continue playing football right there in Orlando, the same spot where you had a chance to play for UCF?
Yeah, I mean it was nice geographically. Obviously I spent the 2 years kind of bouncing around with different NFL teams, and then coming to Arena, my goal was always still, all right, well, I just got to play some more in Arena. It was during the offseason, the NFL, get another opportunity to go back in the NFL. And then, having a team in Orlando and the quality that the Preds were, and having Gruden as a coach, like it wasn't kind of a step back where you're going into, well, I'm going to keep on playing, but I'm in, Kalamazoo, Michigan, or freezing my butt off, or some small town. So that was nice. I was comfortable, obviously, with the area, and then had to go out there and show I could still play.
Was that league fun? Obviously, we know the rules are different. Obviously, indoors. Was that league fun? Was it crazy? Like, how would you describe just playing arena football in general?
I mean, honestly, that was the most fun you have as a receiver, right? You guys can score 60, 70 points a game. You're throwing the ball 90% of the game. And then, hey, I'm going to let you have high motion. So you get a running start on these DBs, and a lot of it's man-on-man coverage. So that's what I always like. We never ran a lot in college or faced a lot of man coverage in college just because it was too difficult. It's hard for a DB if, he's chasing you for 3, 4, 5 seconds. As a receiver, you should always win in man coverage. So now you're taking Arena, which you're meant to score a lot of points. You're going to throw the ball, and it's man coverage. I mean, it was a blast. Small enough teams, our rosters were anywhere from 20 to 24 traveling. So you're flying commercial airlines. It's not team jets or anything with that small guys. You're flying commercial airlines. You're playing in other cities. You stay usually out in that city after your game. And then you guys got to come back. So it's kind of, hey, play a football game, then you go out, have a good time at night, and you fly back the next day. And, do it again the next week.
Jimmy, you still living in Orlando? How closely are you following the UCF teams the last few years?
I'm out in Oviedo, actually. So, I've been season ticket holders for quite some time now. Take my wife and my kids there. Try to get them to at least every weekend game. The weeknight games can be a little difficult with school. But, I try to I went out to one of the spring practices, it's really to kind of look at the facilities. And it's funny because they're now talking about the weight room that we never had, and that was promised to be there when we were recruited, how out of date that is, how small it is. And I'm like, this is insane what you guys have right now. And this is out of date, and you guys need to upgrade this and the indoor bubble, and you got the on-campus stadium. I mean, it's still exciting to go back. You do just kind of shake your head at times and say, well, what if I would have had this? Or what if, I was 3 years later or 5 years later? The publicity UCF gets, and again, that was from winning and having some of the great teams that we've had. But, going into the Big 12 now, I mean, it's taken some time, but it feels really, really good to be a part of kind of those building blocks, and now to see where, we truly are in this Power Five, to where, we're going to go in the Big East. The Big East folds. And it kind of always being this shuffle of, hey, 1 year, 2 year, too late.
Yeah, I remember that Wayne Dench weight room. It was like a closet, man. It was tiny. And
you're saying on the other side of campus.
Yeah. Before they built the wellness center, before they built that whole thing. And then remember there was a little weight room inside the arena too. It was like hidden back there. It was like a very small weight room.
Yeah, I don't even know. It might have been, I wonder if that, because we had basketball and we had some of the volleyball in ours. I remember we had the brown recluse spider like breakout in the locker room. One of the springs, like everybody's coming out of practice. They all got these bites and everything over them. They end up finding like nests. They were in everybody's pads in the old Wayne bench.
So how cool is it now seeing us join the Big 12 finally? After we were talking about this for years, probably back when we were in school. I remember, hey, we're going to, like you said, we're going to join the Big East and all that. Finally, the day has come on this past Saturday. Officially, we are now a Big 12 school. How proud are you of that?
That's awesome. I mean, what you hope, right? You hope the Big 12 stays a Power 5. They don't start pulling teams and everybody's splitting. But, I mean, I think UCF, UCF's not a surprise to anybody in the nation now. It's not one of those, okay, this is a tune-up game or anything like that. I mean, we're well beyond that. So, rightfully, we deserve to be in a Power 5, be in those discussions every year. Now, you got to continue playing well, and you got to play well every single week. That's the biggest thing I think will be, from a injury, maintaining your body. Again, the depth thing we had talked about earlier. I think if we just have, continuous years, it's a win for the Big 12 too, to get in the state of Florida. I mean, you still have to say every school in the nation that is a top program, you look at their skill position, someone's coming out of Florida for recruiting. Hopefully we can continue to keep those guys in-house. I mean, we beat Florida in a bowl game. Like, we're one of the top schools in Florida where we've had all this tradition of usually your Florida State's Miami. UCF is up there, and when we've played them, we've beaten them. So, I think getting, this opportunity is well deserved, and now we have to continue playing and continue winning.
All right, Jimmy, we end every interview around here with some rapid fire questions. It could be music, movies, sports, food. You never know what you're going to get. So are you prepared for the rapid fire random questions?
Sure, man.
All right. So you were at UCF before we really had a chance to play the Cows, right? That's a rivalry that's big now, but you all didn't get a chance to play USF back in those days. So who was the one school that you hated? Who was your biggest rival? Who was the school, whether you played them or not, that you absolutely just despised then and maybe still despise now?
I mean, Akron was one of those, but I don't really despise them now. But I guess that was just one of those MAC teams that we played before we're in the MAC. Then we're in the MAC with them. I mean, we just, I despised the VTech. Getting a couple opportunities against them, one home, one away. Syracuse, they had a really good program back then, and I felt both of the games we played, we should have beaten them. I mean, honestly, we didn't play our best, and there were some gaping holes in their defense that we didn't take advantage of, and we should have. And I'll be first to say I didn't play the greatest either in some of those games. So I still don't root for Syracuse when I see them on TV.
All right, we told you before we started recording, we were at school the same time as you. We started in 98 to 2002. I remember the keg parties. Where were the best keg parties? I'm going to give you a few options. Knights Crossing, Boardwalk, Jefferson Commons, or maybe something else. Give me another one.
Well, I got to go with Boardwalk because that's where I lived.
We lived in Boardwalk too.
Yeah, I went in there only my sophomore year. Then I kind of moved a little further away. But Knights Crossing was always good.
Yeah, we started in Knights Crossing. Phase 3 was our first 2 years, and then we moved to Boardwalk for the last 2 years.
Okay.
Jimmy, you are tied for second all-time in UCF with consecutive games with a catch. Do you know how many games you have consecutively with a catch?
32?
33. You have 33 consecutive games with a catch, tied with Charles Lee. Sean Beckton is first with 42, although he told us it's really like 45 because he didn't count some FCS championship games or something. So he claims that's actually 45. You are still tied for second with 33.
All right. Yeah, see, we never had postseason, so we only played 11 games. Up to my last year was where we got a 12th game. Now they're playing like 14 a year. That's terrible.
Yeah.
All these stats are going to go out the way. I know.
All right. What was the pregame hype music for you?
So I had my own little kind of, mix CD, if you would. A lot of it was kind of heavier rock. Right before kickoff, I'd kind of listen to some rap music night before, morning of, but it was Korn and Blind was the one that I would actually listen to before I went out of the locker room the last time.
Yeah, we've had a bunch of guys, Jimmy, who do good Coach George O'Leary impressions. Obviously, you didn't play for Coach O'Leary. I have not found anyone yet, though, that does a really good Mike Kruczek impersonation. Do you have any – who does the best Kruczek impersonation? Can you do a Kruczek impersonation? Did you have a go-to catchphrase? I feel like you need to learn more about Coach Cruz and sort of his mannerisms.
No, he just would always have that smile, very dark tan and very pearly white teeth, and he would just have that big grin on him. But I can't think of anything that, catchphrase Schneider might have a better opportunity to be in the quarterback's room. But he was a little intimidating. I mean, the guy was still jacked and had the Pittsburgh Steelers Super Bowl ring always flashing in your face. So I don't have a good impression of him.
We heard stories. That's all he's.
We heard stories. You guys walk in the weight room and he'd already be drenched in sweat, like getting a workout in at that point.
Dude, I mean, he would squat a house. I was like, who is this old guy? Just throwing around weight. And I was like, I'm a receiver. I gotta stay lean.
All right. Besides yourself, who is the biggest ladies' man on the team?
Besides me? My wife wouldn't want to hear that. Who would it have been?
It wasn't Schneider.
He would play the quarterback card. Honestly, I don't know.
Hinshaw? Tyson Hinshaw, maybe?
Well, so yeah, Tyson was 2 years older.
All right.
So yes, if you want to go from that age, yeah, for sure, Tyson.
I know the other name we've heard, Jimmy. I don't know if you would have any recollection. Was Antoine Poe. We've heard was quite the ladies' man his time at UCF as well.
So Poe was at my rival high school. Antoine just maybe we weren't out enough. He seemed to be injured a lot. I know he had the soft-spoken voice, but yeah, I didn't do a lot of kind of after-hour stuff with him.
Was there still rivalry between you guys since you had rival high schools?
Nah. I mean, once you kind of make it to that next level, and especially being at the same school, I mean, we were good teammates.
All right, where's the go-to spot to eat late night after you've been at Boardwalk, hanging out with your friends? You know, you need a late night snack, a late night munchie. Where'd you guys go to grab some food late night?
I'm trying to think of all that stuff that was Liquid Cellar was still there.
Yeah.
So I mean, nothing was good. It was all
of course.
Yeah.
Were you a Denny's guy? Were you a Crystal Burger guy? Like, where would you go to? 2 a.m. You needed a bunch of food just to hold you
Taco
over.
Bell. We were always Taco Bell. We knew they were open.
Yep. All right.
Right there on Dean and University, so it wasn't too far away either.
Exactly. All right. Who's the group of guys right now? There's a big game on Saturday. Who are the teammates you're getting together with to watch the game if there was a game this week?
Oh, Schneider. I still stay in touch with Schneider. So yeah, he's coaching out at Cocoa now. So I try to go to some of his high school games, kind of rip him on things if he's missing certain things. He's doing extremely well out there, but I always try to give him a couple pointers or not. But yeah, Schneider's a guy that usually, and then Tyson I'll still hit up. But these kids, man, they take a lot of this time up.
Tell me about it. Jimmy, there's one thing that bonds all UCF fans and alum together, and that's we all have a common enemy, UCF parking services. How many tickets did Jimmy Fryzel get in his time at UCF and parking services?
So Jimmy only probably got about 3 because we always had some decals that were the red boxes with the faculties.
Sure.
So there were stacks of those things that you're able just to kind of do a little autograph. We didn't have the stickers really back then. So there were all the hang tags. So if you had enough hang tags, man, you got to park up front, hang it up, give a little signature. That was it. We could date them. We had enough of them.
All right. How old are your kids now?
I got a 13, 11, and 6.
Girls too?
Girls, the oldest, and then 2 boys.
So I'm around the same category as you. How many Taylor Swift songs do you know now?
So thankfully, I never got asked to spend all that money to go to those tickets. Honestly, that was maybe when she was like 6, 7, she would sing them. But after that, kind of fell off.
You got lucky. You saved yourself a lot of money because
I know. Dude, I use some of these things. That's crazy.
Yeah, tell me about it.
And now what? Did you go over to Tampa?
I didn't even go. My wife went and took my 2 daughters. I couldn't buy 4 tickets to that thing. That's just outrageous.
3 is enough. Jimmy, if you didn't play football, what sport would you want to play?
I was a soccer guy growing up. So that was I didn't play football till I got into high school. So I always did the traveling soccer stuff. Enjoyed that. Really not sure why. I mean, watching it now, like you get bumped, you're rolling around on the ground saying you're injured. I kind of like the aggressive part. I got quite a few cards in high school when I still was playing soccer, but had kind of a football mentality. But that was something, I mean, I always enjoyed it, always grew up on it. I wish my golf game was better. I'd love to continue playing golf, but just very frustrating that the ball doesn't move, and for some reason I still can't hit that wide fairway.
All right, you said you got season tickets. Where do you sit? What's the game day like for you? Are you tailgating for hours before the game? Are you hitting up Burger U? What's the game day like?
So we're in Stadium Club, but usually game day is trying to get the kids together and get there by kickoff. I mean, it's such, especially if it's in the heat or a daytime game, we kind of have to – the 6-year-old, he throws a big wrench in it. So you can't have him out too long. He'll start saying, this is boring, I don't like it. So we kind of time it out. If we can get there right before, we'll grab everybody food down the Stadium Club, take it up to the seats. And usually I'll probably tailgate at the house watching maybe some of the noon games, and then head up with the family. So the parking at least is helpful.
How often do you get recognized in the stands? Or we come up to you and say anything?
No, I mean, the majority, it's either guys we all went to school with kind of the same time or just some of the former players. I mean, not much. I don't, they see some guy beaten down with 3 kids jumping on him. Like, poor guy.
What kind of game watcher are you? Are you intense? Are you like watching every play? Are you more laid back? Are you sort of trying to figure out formations? What kind of game watcher are you?
So I always watch the receivers. Like, there's times I won't even see what's going on, like where the ball is, because I'll watch. I try to pick out, from a coverage where the DB is standing, where his eyes are looking, how the receivers are lining up, just to even try to pick the play. Hey, is this a run play? Or I'm looking at, are they in a 2 shell? Are they rotating a 3? Everything's kind of on the perimeter wise when I watch. It drives my wife crazy, but I try to stay quiet, just kind of roll through my mind, little things that, hey, I would do this, or they're tipping this off. And then I try to sit back. I mean, obviously we score or something like that, I'm cheering, I'm up in, but yeah, I try to be quiet during those things.
Who's the guy that you've had the most fun watching the last few years as a receiver?
As a receiver, I mean, I really loved watching Traquan. I thought he was such a complete receiver. I mean, from just consistency, making the plays when we needed to. He was probably one of the guys I really enjoyed watching, because I felt he did everything right. Wasn't like, hey, you did 30% of them, I dropped them, but then you're breaking them. He was consistent.
All right, Jim, we'll get you out here in this question. You can settle a debate for us. UCF's put a lot of wide receivers in the NFL. They've also put a lot of defensive backs in the NFL. So do you consider UCF wide receiver U or DBU?
Wide receiver U.
Yes.
Not even close?
Not even close. Because, you go back to we had Sante and Travis. And then I guess Atari. Those would be kind of the 3 in a row. But receiver-wise, I mean, you go back to Sean Jefferson and Becton. I mean, we just always had guys, and then Brandon and Mike and me and Doug. And then afterward, I mean, with Gabe, I feel our receivers that are going now are sticking in big ways, to where I don't think you get as much publicity from the DBs. Not saying they're still not in the league, but, everybody loves offense. We're getting guys that are showing out, and with some big teams.
Well, Jimmy, we appreciate you giving us so much of your time today, walking down memory lane, sharing your memories of your time at UCF, man. Hopefully we'll get a chance to catch up to you with the game this year and say hello, but definitely appreciate everything you did for UCF, and appreciate you for joining the show tonight.
Sounds good, man. Appreciate it, guys.